Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day we explore another industry that has been transformed through technology, digital and social media. But in a world consisting of doom and gloom and 24-hour rolling news channels, I also try to bust a few myths, misconceptions and provide a much-needed positive narrative out there. And today I want to tackle the subject of influencer marketing. What is an influencer? What is the ROI of engaging with an influencer? And how do you measure the effects that they can have on your business? And also, can we wrap all that up in a human story too? That's a tough ask, I hear you say. Well, not at all, because today I've come across a great story of two ladies that go by the name of Amra and Elma, who were in a very traditional career, one as an economist, the other as an attorney, but then life took them on a very different path. And now they are influencers with millions of followers. And between them, they've now got their own digital agency called A&E. And A&E now has the largest client portfolio of Fortune 500 companies such as Wells Fargo, P&G, Netflix, etc. But I want to explore both the topic and the human story behind the company. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears just outside of Chicago, where we're going to find out more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Elma Beganovich. I'm one of the founders of A&E. We're a digital marketing agency that works with industry leaders and Fortune 500 companies. So from EssilorLuxottica to Nestle to HTC to Huawei. And we also work with startups which are venture-backed and small businesses.
Fantastic. And why working with so many great brands out there? For example, A&E, like you said, is a digital agency with a large client portfolio of Fortune 500 companies such as P&G, Netflix, VF Corp and Wells Fargo too. But can I ask that you set the scene and just tell everyone listening a little bit about how you're helping these brands and what makes A&E different from all those other digital agencies out there?
Sure. So that's a great question. So basically, what makes A&E different is, from the outset. So this was late 2012, and Amra and I, so I'm an attorney by background, New York bar attorney. I was doing my LLM at Georgetown Law in securities and financial regulation. And Amra was an economist working on World Bank projects in Washington, D.C. So, we basically, the core of A&E and how we started is digital and it's on social media. We started as influencers and essentially grew to over 2 million followers. And what had happened, at the time, we only had startups as our clients and small businesses. And so they asked, switching from advertising with us as influencers, they said, how can we continue working with you? You've outgrown us, we can't afford to advertise on your social channels, but we'd love to do something else. So their repeated request was basically, can you manage our own social channels and essentially can you replicate your own growth success for our brands? And so Amra and I kind of unknowingly at the time, we came together, we talked about it and we said yes. And we didn't know, but basically we were, the path was being paved for us to become a digital agency. So this is how it started.
I love that story. And I mean, between you and your partner there, like you said, you've got over 2 million followers, but I'd love to take you back to where it all began. So can you share the story behind your company and the path that led to you leaving traditional careers such as an economist and an attorney to being an influencer? I mean, it must be a great story there too. Can you share that?
Sure. So, basically, what had happened, so this all started in Washington, D.C., late 2012. Facebook actually, didn't even have its pages out. So, Facebook pages didn't exist. I mean, imagine a world without Facebook pages, but it did exist. And so, Amra, basically, at the time, the conversation was, Well, we have these like traditional authority magazines, and they are, becoming increasingly unrelatable to, their readers. So, for example, with Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and Style, they were basically talking about, for example, women who were spending like thousands of dollars in skincare, hundreds of thousands of dollars in plastic surgery, and they were sort of like pushing this celebrity, but that was really unrelatable. So, most women can't afford that. That's out of their budget. So basically the frustration on our side, and we saw that with our circle of friends as well, was, well, what do we kind of read that we can, relate to and feel good about ourselves? So, lo and behold, essentially Amra set up one night, all night, and at the time Blogger was very popular. So I think WordPress was, it was around, but Blogger was the thing. And so she sat up all night and figured out HTML and CSS coding and put up our first blog. And so, 3 months into it, we had over 100,000 uniquely monthly visitors. And then brands approached us. And, at the very beginning, it was an exchange basis. But we still figured, if they were willing to, expend the costs of labor, of shipment, of product, that there must be something here. And so this was basically kind of the start of our business.
Wow, Blogger, that takes me back. I think I've got a rogue Blogger site that's still hanging on somewhere.
Yeah, it was a different world.
Yeah, it really was. It shows you how
much
far
more simple.
It shows you how far we've come. I mean, if we go back just 6 monts, everyone was celebrating the beginning of 2020, a new year, a new decade full of opportunities. But then, of course, do you remember that?
Yeah, they were saying this is going to be like the roaring 20s, like 1920s. There was so much innovation, so much progress. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, 3 months later, bricks and mortar stores all were forced to close. So can you tell me a little bit more about how to use influencer marketing to actually stimulate e-commerce spending and direct buying? Because that's where all the sexy stuff's happening right now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in terms of, using influencer marketing to stimulate your e-commerce channels, I would say, there are a few things, but something that's very important that, we always talk to our clients about and to keep in mind is, do not think because social media has, developed so much, from its early days. So now you have, options, for example, on LinkedIn to embed links, or how to hashtag, how to tag people, individuals from companies and so forth. Don't make the mistake of hiring an intern, and, having, or, a student or somebody fresh out of school who, has no experience to do this, because it's gotten quite sophisticated, and depending on, the platform that you're trying to market. And then, they also need to understand the strategy behind what you're trying to do as a brand, and then invest, probably more in some platforms than others, because that's where your target demographic is hanging out, virtually at least. So there's quite a bit of strategy involved just to set up the environment, if you will. And then in terms of and hire a professional. And it's okay even if you don't have a large budget, hire someone part-time, or, an agency, like have them set up a strategy for you. But do not go with a student or intern. It's just going to end up costing you more long-term. The other factors taken into consideration, you have to know with influencer marketing, you have to get to know your industry really well, because influencer marketing has also become increasingly competitive in terms of, you need to understand as a brand, who are your major competitors and how are they utilizing influencers. And, different industries do, utilize influencers differently. For example, the beauty industry is very, keen on investing in YouTube, and now there's IGTV, so video tutorials essentially, and that's really powerful. Video gaming, YouTube is everything for gamers, if you will. Understand your industry, and then understand your major competitors, and then also really go in depth and get to know who are the true influencers. And when I say who are the true influencers, I mean, who's the epicenter of influence in your industry? So for example, for the fashion industry, there is Brian Boy, who has significantly less followers than the most popular fashion influencers, which would be Chiara Ferragni. She has over 20 million followers. But even though Brian Boy is significantly smaller, Chiara and large influencers like Chiara will be following him because they respect him, and he's basically, very important in fashion industry. So in other words, you have to roll up your sleeves and do your homework, if you will, to find out who are the true influencers. And they may not be, like notoriously famous, but they are really, really respected within the industry, and those large ones will follow them and will listen to them. And influence them in turn.
And I don't mean to embarrass you here, but you and Amra are megastar influencers, as well as being founders of New York top influencer marketing agency. But I get the impression that as someone that frequents this world, you are going to be wincing, shaking your head, or even doing the odd face palm when you hear a lot of the advice about influencers out there. So I've got to ask, are there any myths or misconceptions or common pitfalls that you can finally lay to rest around the world of influencers?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the common pitfalls, like I was, saying around the world of influencers, just because you see that following size, don't be too quick to jump to conclusions. You need to do your homework. How long has the influencer been around? Who have they worked with? Which brands have they worked with? Which, other influencers have they partnered with? What does the industry think of this influencers? Like, are they a true epicenter, as I was saying, of influence? And are they also, something taken into consideration, as a brand, whatever target demographic you are targeting? So it could be, for example, in the United States, it could be, regional. It could be, for example, the Northeast, the New York area, or it could be nationwide. Or is it international? So really, understand basically the influencer space, and then that that particular industry, and really dig through to see, like, is this really is this really a true influencer, or is this something that has this person has kind of gained popularity overnight? So while they may have the followers, it may not work for my target demographic.
Absolutely. I think it was a few years ago, there was a whole trend of people buying lots of Instagram followers or Facebook followers that were just bots. And you could always usually tell them by their complete lack of engagement on any post that they make. But for businesses, what kind of analytics and metrics should they be using to measure ROI when dealing with influencer marketing?
Sure, absolutely. So, in terms of the bots, the good news is to get back to that. So Instagram has done several what they call purges, and so now I think it's done a fairly good job of cleaning out the bot followers, and I think it's also deterred anybody thinking to do that from doing that, because you can basically drop overnight in your following. So whether that's individuals like personal brands or companies, we would strongly advise against that, because it doesn't, for companies especially, it doesn't make any sense, because these people aren't buying. And even if you're doing it for image reasons, it still doesn't make sense, because if it drops overnight, it looks really bad. So but Instagram, I think from when it started 2010, it's done a really good job with that. And then in terms of analytics and metrics, social, like I said, social media has really evolved. I think Instagram does a good job when it launched its analytics and insights. So it goes so much and is in detail as to ask or to display for us, the country, the city, the time the followers are active. So it helps the influencer, when they're posting, the time of the day. It also tells you the age group, right, of the followers. So who has, what, it breaks it down for you. So it's been pretty good. And then, it breaks it down between impressions and reach. So reach is unique viewers, and impression is, the total amount of views. So I think it's, done a good job. And then you have, metrics like for Instagram, Insta story swipe up. So you can track the click-through rate. But I think that, for companies and, this ties in, it's really important. You were saying one of the first things to do is also to set up your, KPIs, your key performance indicators before going through with a campaign.
Absolutely. And a few years ago, I saw Gary Vaynerchuk deliver a keynote at a tech event. And one of the things he did, we got everybody to stand up in the audience and said, how many people here watch live TV? And then half the audience sat down. Then it was, how many people turn over the channel when an advert comes on? And more of the audience disappeared. And then it was like, well, how many people that are watching the adverts reach for their phone instead and look at their phone? And there was hardly anybody stood up in the end, of course. It just shows how TV advertising just does not work anymore. So from your view, how important is influencer marketing in the consumer decision journey here in this digital age?
Yeah, I love the consumer decision journey. I've taken a look at it quite thoroughly, especially, like I said, we've worked with a lot of startups, and this is like the biggest. I think corporations get this much better. But sort of, the newbies, if you will, who have a great product and are looking to get to customers. The consumer decision journey, particularly, there's that, magic rule of 7 in marketing, which basically states that, you as a brand have to be seen at least 7 times before the consumer makes a purchase decision, right? So they decide yes or no. And this is really important. So sort of, brands don't strike themselves out too early, if you will. So give yourself time. And even if you don't have the budget, spread the budget, throughout the year or throughout, at least like quarterly. And just to make sure that you are, and that's why social media and influencer marketing is really powerful. So you are repeatedly seen. And that's the beauty of social media. Once you get into people's feeds, so once they follow you, you are, basically having an opportunity to freely market yourself to them. And they're on their mobile phones out of boredom. So there you are, as long as you're obviously doing a good job with your content, you have a strategy set in place. So you're not just, giving annoying advertisement. But yeah, understand that it takes time for people in the consumer decision journey to process you. One, that you exist, and 2, after they register, okay, this is, something new, whether it's a new product or a new brand, they're going to go also, give themselves time to research it. So it's important also to have along that consumer decision journey reviews, which influencers play a part. So whether it's a review on YouTube, whether it's a review on blogs, or on Instagram, but they're going to do their homework. So make sure that you've kind of, left crumbs, if you will, everywhere. And then also, it was really interesting. McKinsey did a study of the consumer decision journey, and they did a study. It was over 20,000 consumers across 4 different industries. And what they found, what was new now in the consumer decision journey, is that in order to have that customer retention, so that loyalty, that the customer actually, after the purchase, still went back on the internet and was continuing to read reviews about the product. So again, like, influencers are, great way to, confirm, basically give, a confidence boost to the customer. Okay, yes, I think this product's fairly good, but again, like, just these reviews are incredible. And I, tend to agree with what some of these reviews are saying. So yeah, the consumer decision journey is definitely, it's sort of like, I think of it, if someone presented you a Ferrari, you watch and listen. But if they were like, okay, here it is, now go buy one, it doesn't work that way.
And I'm conscious we will have people listening all over the world. And whether a listener is going to try and do it their own way or work with you or a different partner, what are the best practices for influencer marketing? Is there any tips or anything you can share around that?
Yes, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier, KPIs, and I'm happy to give some examples. So basically, every brand, it's important, whether a personal brand or a product or service, is that you understand everyone's looking, at the ROI at the end of the day. So in order to measure the ROI, it's important to set those KPIs, so key performance indicators, and there are many of them. And so we always talk to our clients, to consider. Obviously, you have to consider what stage you are, as a business. Have you been around forever? Maybe you need an update, a makeover, or you've become, outdated. You're not relevant, so you're trying to be relevant again. And with millennials and Gen Z, or you're a new brand, nobody knows about you. You need to basically gain the trust with the customers. So yeah, set those KPIs and some examples, and we talked briefly about them, but basically, have, for example, links that are customized links for a certain campaign with influencers. So, hand those links out, if you want to measure, for example, traffic, right, from different influencer channels. So have those links out. So that would be, and you can measure it, like you can do cost per click for that, or you can do impressions to see, how much traffic the influencer is essentially driving. You can, another example of a KPI are followers. As I mentioned, followers are important because it's your free marketing tool to your customers every day. So you can maybe partner with some, whether it's influencers or other brands that are have this basically complementary relationship with you. I don't know if you're, for example, like a health drink brand, you could partner with a yoga studio, right? And so to have some sort of giveaway. People like that in terms of the following, to incentivize them to follow you. But again, don't make sure that you're also on the other side. It's sort of like inviting the guests into the house. Make sure your house is tidy, and your house now is like for all intents and purposes your social media channel profile. So make sure you have the good content that would provide value. So yeah, another one would be followers. And then another one too, for example, maybe you're looking to capture, emails from potential customers. So you could, again, like do some sort of, giveaway, sweepstakes, and have, direct, so the call to action would be for the audience to fill out a form on your website, so you can capture their emails and their basically profiles. So there's different ways to set up, or you could, if you're very sales driven, you're very confident, again, but taking into account that consumer decision journey, you could do promo codes, and you could say something like, for a limited time, like you have this period that you get like 20, 25, 30% off of certain products.
Great advice there. So much value in that. And I must admit, it has been said that I've got a great face for radio, which is why I stick to podcasts. But there's a lot of social platforms with live video now. So are there any tips on how businesses or individuals can get the most out of Instagram Live, Facebook Live, or even LinkedIn Live to stimulate e-commerce spending?
Yes, absolutely. So again, as a brand, you have to think about, what value am I providing to my customers? So, when, for example, you're launching a live video, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, maybe invite somebody else from the industry that's respected. I don't know, you could be, in the business of interior design. And maybe you want to, now people are obviously having to work from home. So, they're interested about making the space as comfortable as possible. So maybe give them, some tips how to make their, home office, right, look better, or their, living room. They're spending increasingly more time there as well. So, provide some sort of, useful value. Maybe you're, food company, and, maybe, a chef who's going to share some cool recipes using your products. So it's about, I think, that sort of, collaboration, but always keeping in mind the customer, being, very customer centric and focused. And so thinking, innovatively within your industry, be creative about it. How does this, why would somebody want to watch this? So saying, just I'm great, I have the best product or service is not obviously good enough. But think of creative and fun ways to capture your audience, and to keep them on also on Instagram and on Facebook Live.
I love that. And like we said a few moments ago, the world has changed dramatically in 6 months. So I've got to ask, how do you see the world of influencer marketing continue to evolve, especially as the world changes at the moment?
I think influencer marketing is just going to get bigger, and there's just going to be more and more of the new generations. Now you have like your teens that have millions of followers. It's become sort of like a career, which we would have, Amra and I, when we started in late 2010, would have never foreseen this, but it's become a huge industry. In 2019, it's, it was an $8 billion industry. So it's just, it's evolving because also, as we were talking about, the consumer has become basically overnight, educated in how to do online shopping. So influencers are basically like your modern day radio DJs. You mentioned radio. So, once upon a time, as you probably know, the radio DJ endorsed, products. And now that's, no longer the case, you basically have influencers. I think it's definitely an industry that's just going to evolve. And it's going to, I think, strengthen, especially with new tools being available every day to measure, the performance of each of these campaigns, because that obviously wasn't an option with, let's say outdoor advertisement. I mean, if you put an ad up in Times Square, you had no idea, who really saw it, was it even relevant people? I mean, you knew the crowds were there, but you had, a lot less of an idea than you do now with all the, technology available.
Fantastic. And for anyone that would like to find out more information about the work that you're doing, how they can work with you or follow you on social, what's the best way of doing that? Can you point them in the right direction?
Sure. Yeah. So just go to our website, amraandelma.com, and you'll be able to find us. And there are social channels there as well. So amraandelma.com. And I'm sure you will also have a nice link to so the audience can find us easily. Yeah.
Definitely. I'll add those links into the blog post that will accompany this interview. But there's so much I've loved about your story, not just your success now, but where you've come from. And I love you came from very traditional careers as an economist and an attorney. And then you've embraced new media, digital and technology. And what you've accomplished here is phenomenal. I wish you all the best of luck for the future. Hopefully we can do this again in 6 to 12 months, see how things are changing even more. But a big thank you for taking the time to share your story with me today.
Thank you. Yeah, that would definitely be exciting, especially because things are moving at the speed of light right now.
What a great story. And I can't thank them enough for coming on the podcast today, not only for sharing that story, but also busting a few myths about influencers too. And of course, it's great to hear that Instagram have broadcast that purge sound right across the network and remove those army of bots. I never quite understood why people would buy an army full of bots and have zero engagement. But there were so many big takeaways from the conversation for me, such as when a brick and mortar store is closed, how businesses can use influencer marketing to stimulate e-commerce spending and direct buying, not to mention the analytics and metrics of how businesses can measure ROI with influencer marketing too, because it's so important to take a look under the hood beyond the follower counts and have a look at the KPIs and measure that ROI effectively. And finally, of course, just how important influencers are becoming to marketing in the consumer decision journey. So many big topics, but please, over to you. I'm going to pass the virtual microphone over to each and every one of you. Let me know your thoughts about today's conversation. If you've got anything at all to share, my email address is techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, just @NeilC.Hughes. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast as much as I did, and hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow where we'll do it all again. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.